What's going on, everybody? This is the blockchain backer bringing you the latest cryptocurrency news and analysis. Today, we'll be taking a look over here at the Bitcoin price chart and the altcoin market and the stock market as we've seen big price action take place in the markets over the course of the last week as the Bitcoin price chart has taken its tumble down with stocks on the heels of the biggest bank collapse since the great financial crisis as Silicon Valley Bank collapses this past week. What does it mean for crypto? What does it mean for the stock market? And what are the things we'll be looking forward to in the coming week? Because it sounds like the next few days are going to be pretty pivotal on what all of this means after we have the biggest bank collapse occur since the great financial crisis. And it's the second largest bank collapse we've seen. The only one during the great financial crisis that was bigger than this was Washington Mutual. But the sudden implosion of Silicon Valley Bank leaves many concerned, as Wells Fargo loses 11% last week. Citigroup loses 7.7%. JP Morgan loses 6.8%, Bank of America loses 11.6%, and Silicon Valley Bank plunges 62%, down to 106, coming off of their peak of 761. So I've been in Costa Rica for the last week on a mission trip with my church, deep in the jungle, as we were building a house for a pastor, and I posted over here on Twitter back on March 7th that I was there in Costa Rica, and obviously for the last several weeks reminding everybody that I would be away from March 6th through 11th and would be away from Twitter and YouTube because I was pretty aware that I would not have cell phone reception. I was in the jungle there in southern Costa Rica, almost in Panama. But of course, we all know the powers that be. They all watched the Blockchain Backer YouTube channel. They knew it was time to strike. I'm just kidding. Maybe. But I think I want to break this video down into a couple of different segments as this is a Sunday update and we get ready to head into the new week and just kind of what we're heading into as we go into this new week. One, let's talk about crypto and Bitcoin really quick and the altcoin market. And then let's talk about broader markets too and the impacts of this bank collapse that has happened in here. Let's just talk about the technical behavior of Bitcoin here really fast. One, for weeks on end, we've been sitting here talking about these levels, saying we're at this resistance level. The typical thing that usually ends up happening is that we have A, B, Cs that pull all the way back down to these levels down in here. On the video I put out last week, we were saying, hey, look, so long as we're still holding these, this is something to keep an eye on. Should we take out that low? Boom, that invalidates any of the things that we've seen happen back in 2020 and back in 2019. Where we have higher highs and higher lows. But for weeks on end, the thing that typically happens is you get back up to wave 4, and then we go in for a long and grueling ABC that takes place in here. As we showed examples of how this occurs throughout the market. We set our new low, waddle, go break back up to the height, take a second stab, and then what do? We ABC our way back down. This is the typical behavior of it. We've talked about it for weeks on end, and the reality of it being that it could probably be grueling. It can probably last for quite some time. And sometimes they can be drawn out for a really long time. Other times, not quite as long. But typically, these go on for quite a little while. And a lot of this isn't new to many of you. You've heard me talk about this for months on end. Even when I was on the BitBoy Crypto YouTube channel a little bit over 2 weeks ago, talked about the same thing. I'll play a little clip from this here too, to say, where did we pull back down to? And, we've followed super cycles. We've gotten ourselves back down into these levels. And now we're starting to flip all those little indicators in there that happen on larger time frames to say bottoms are in. Yeah. Each time that this stuff has occurred, it's marked that the bottom is in. The real challenge about times like this right now is that bottoming processes aren't always just like, hey, we're going to go in a straight line right back up. We can really spend some time down in here and recognizing just where we are with the current price action right now is that we're pretty paused out at the top of a range right here. We didn't do a range breakout with the move that we've had right here being stuck. And it's incredibly common to actually see some ABC action in here and pause out in here. And so we're kind of, it's kind of a mixed bag right now. We're getting close to the summer. A lot of times February's, Marches, and Aprils, those can be exciting. But May's, June's, and July's, like the summer, man, it's usually dead. It's usually just boring. And so it's just going to be on whether or not there's more. This is my primary guess, right? If I'm going to guess what the market's going to do, this is my primary guess next. So price action playing out accordingly. Okay. A lot of people cheering for the big breakouts in the moving averages. We knew those were there. We knew the range top was there. Now the question is, can we kind of actually really find some support to actually end up happening right in here? And can this thing waddle sideways for some time on Bitcoin and the market just kind of find some stability here? If you start seeing Bitcoin still continue the next week and just head down here to like 16,800, that's a little bit concerning. But so far, for the weeks of what we've been talking about with ABCs occurring in here, we've been going really just kind of according to what these things really just typically do. There's your A leg. A leg is starting to wrap up, whether it's got it like, you know, if we're having the bullish divergence emerge on the end of this, right? Crashing structure, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rolls back up to wave 4. And then boom, here we go. We have the final leg happening in here. Then it actually kind of peters out for some time, really working its way back up into somewhat of a retracement in here to then go on and then do the C leg later, which would typically comes down to this level right around here, about 18.3. That would be your most common technical behavior to happen right in here. So for me now, you've been hearing me say, man, I'm real worried about this area right here as we're back near the top of the range. The most common thing that happens is ABC happening in here, but definitely not some type of like continued breakdown happening in here. That would seem more like it's actually just a crash that is in the works in here, but finding some type of support coming in here to then just peter along sideways for quite some time is really what I'm going to be looking for to come next for the Bitcoin price chart as it works its way back into a retracement and then goes on into the C leg. So now for the next couple of weeks, my thought process is going to be like, all right, we're focusing on this to see, can we find some support to come in here for Bitcoin to work its way back up? And then again, one more time, come back down and scare the market. And like we talked about, really, in this structure, the thing I've really been talking about is sentiment in here and talking about what sentiment would be like in a moment like this. That sentiment would be as bad, if not worse, than what sentiment would be like back down in here. I'm pretty sure we talked about that a half dozen to a dozen times. That sentiment would be really bad in a moment like that, but we didn't really have like a narrative to go along with it. Suddenly we do. So we'll talk more about this here later in this video in relation to the stock market and the concerns with the stock market over there. But we've definitely got that, you know, that sentiment happening in there. But the good news is that, you know, it's taken me a couple of hours to put this together so far at this point and edit it all down. And boom, we've got a little pop over here in the cryptocurrency market where it is finding some support to start to come in right in here. So these are good first signs. There is some support here in the market. Bitcoin's popped up like $800 just in recording right now. But still, my thoughts are, you know, hey, this will probably take a little bit of time right here. We'll see how the market can kind of react to that. I think one of the, you know, from the technical behavior, just what we've talked about, really, man, we've been talking about this since mid-January. We're in mid-March right now. So we say almost 2 months, right? Really just kind of continuing to draw these boxes in here and say, you know, this could be the area where ABC comes from, or is it going to happen from here, or is it going to happen from up here at the top? Just kind of waiting for that ABC to come in. We are technically playing along to that tune. The thing looks it looks like what we've been talking about for 2 months now. We expected a big breakout to come in here, $2,500 daily candle to come in here, and then waiting for it to find some resistance to then work in ABC to take a long time, as we've shown many examples here on the channel of that actually happening. So technically, it looks great, right? I won't play a ton of videos from it, but we know, you know, back in January, we were sitting here talking about this, and I'll just play this one clip for those who are new to the channel. Anybody who's been watching, you definitely have heard it over a dozen times. And that's, of course, if it does stop in here. But a lot of times these things do stop short. So, you know, me, like when I'm sitting here doing this, I'm always playing with Fibonacci's. It's just my thing, right? You know, 702 Fibonacci retracements. That's my jam. That's what I love to do. I'm like, you know what? I see a lot of things lining up. This is like the technical place where we usually will pull back in these types of structures. It also does happen to line up like that. And we can see some confluence of some bounces happening here that, hey, you know, maybe there are some things happening that this actually is the level we're going to pull back to. And hey, that says, hey, there's still a little bit more, which does even give you slightly a higher high. Does it really even, or is it actually pinpoint nail it? It might nail it. Goes a little bit higher. But man, I just can't put my marbles on it that it actually is going to. And, you know, the thing if you're new to the YouTube channel, you'll realize that when things are down, I'm optimistic and bullish. When things get high and they are moving quickly, I start to get a little bit concerned because I get to watch the sentiment of the market. I get to see that people's happiness gets directed at me, and then people's frustration and anger gets directed at me. And, you know, we can sit here and we can talk about that coming, and we can spend every single video talking about it coming. And then when we get there, people are going to be mad, angry, frustrated, and yelling at me again, even if we spend a whole month talking about it. And so we look at Bitcoin right now. We say, hey, what were we just doing in that video, right? We were taking a look at fibs to see could we line ourselves up for that to happen, right? And so where did Bitcoin end up stalling out at? Where's the top in here for Bitcoin? Right there. It's at 25,287, just slightly above that top, right? 25,287, which right there in that video is we were drawing out those fibs there and high anticipation for volatility as Bitcoin price chart stalls at range with altcoin market, with Fed hike. Look in there what we're talking about. We're talking about hitting just barely above there, right above that 25,200 level for that fib to line up, which is what we ended up getting over here, right? So we'll put all that stuff back on there. The thing that does have me cautioned is what we've actually been talking about in relation to the stock market. And this will be something to really watch next week to see, is there going to be a plan to kind of help all this stuff out there in regards to this bank failure that has happened? Because this is now going to become a very tricky situation that I don't think there's really a right answer on how to handle it. It's going to have to be kind of people's gut instincts on how is that going to go with that whole thing. Is this like the start of the actual black swan to emerge? And now you may be thinking to yourself, black swan, right? Shows up out of nowhere, unpredictable for it to happen. But the thing is, we've actually been talking about this for almost a month, that a black swan could emerge right in here, and to keep your eyes on it. Because if a black swan does emerge, that's a bad sign when we zoom out on the stock market to say, hey, we've done all the waves to the upside. We hit the retracement level. Now we've reached this area where a black swan can emerge. And that's typically what happens. That does point to this thing is going to lose itself. And so let me show you a couple of clips on that real quick, because it was talked about in Markets in the Morning a few times. Let's play that really fast. So here we are on February 24th. This is going to be over 2 weeks ago. Let's play this. Dow Jones set to open in 1 minute from right now, actually in 20 seconds. So we'll see how this goes. The idea right now is just that crypto has done relatively well during this whole pullback that's happened in here. We could see that we've just kind of been holding up, even though like we should be way down here if we've been following the Dow. I noticed yesterday, even in a lot of the volatility, we weren't really following along with the volatility that was happening over there in the Dow. But you know, my thought process based on just how I've tracked the whole thing moving up, it's very common for an ABC to show up in here. However, in real breakdowns, when they finally come, this is like where a black swan can get inserted. So it's just, I put watch for narratives. As long as we don't have anything crazy, like personal consumption expenditure, that's not black swan to me. You know, a train like in Ohio, right? That's not a black swan to me. It's something real serious where we're all like, oh my gosh, kind of like the world's going to end type of stuff, right? That's the kind of thing to just keep an eye on. If something like that comes up, then I would start questioning the idea of an ABC happening in here. But this is the type of location where black swans can get inserted. So just keep an eye out for it. I will be keeping an eye out for it. As long as we're just moving down here on the same old inflation narratives, it's not going to be something that worries me. But I am keeping an eye out that this is the type of time period where those types of things can get inserted. So just being aware of that. So have we seen a black swan just happen here in this past week? And here is a stream from Markets in the Morning from 12 days ago. And we're talking about the same thing. So Bitcoin at this time is at 23,763. Let's hear talking about it again. You know, I still believe the likely thing that'll happen will be when the technical chart says black swan enter here. And so like the black swan people are the worst people in the world, because they just pretty much are always calling for gloom and doom, and they don't have a reason. They just say something's going to happen. I can't stand it. Like really, like you can't respect people who are constantly calling for a black swan. So I don't like to sit there and say that. But what I am saying is that when we get into these retraces, and what we don't see is a tremendous narrative for some type of big rejection to come out of these retraces right now. You don't really have a narrative for things to like absolutely crash and crumble. But you can go through history, like using your tinfoil hat, right? To say, when do these things typically occur at? When do you typically get the random narrative and the random storm of narratives to actually end up happening? And like you go back and live in this moment right in here, and everything was good. Everything was completely peachy and fine in here, even into this moment right in here for Bitcoin. We're coming off of the peak, right? Coinbase's IPO, it's small pullback, whatever, right? Dogecoin to the moon, Elon Musk on national television pushing crypto. Your brother-in-law, your sister-in-law, your half sister from another mother from 1,000 miles away is texting you saying that their husband's dabbling in Dogecoin. Everybody's happy and everybody's great. And then finally one pullback, right? So we pull back, pull in, and then what happens? All of a sudden, a storm of narratives come in here. But we've already hit retracement levels, but the storm of narratives enters in right here. China bans Bitcoin mining. Tesla's not going to be adding any more Bitcoin to their balance sheet. Tesla's not going to accept Bitcoin for payments for vehicles. Elon Musk suddenly says that Bitcoin is terrible for the environment and it's not good. And the sky just falls apart and completely crashes and crumbles. But the technicals all indicated that they were coming. So I don't think we really have, we didn't really have like a whole lot of things in the market screaming that this was going to come outside of the technicals that were saying that it was going to come. And then, the narrative entered later. And so that's kind of the thing that I think that I'm on caution about right now. If some really crazy narratives really start to emerge right now, as the Dow sits here, right? Important to remember the context of where we are. Just kind of keeping it like, I don't think the narrative exists out there right now of what's happening in the world for that to happen. I think we would have to get some type of new narrative to come in here to convince people otherwise, to explain it away. So that's kind of what I meant last week when I said be mindful of narratives. And then here we are on March 2nd, which was 10 days ago, talking about something similar as well, which I'm answering a question where someone asks, hey, do you think we can go up and set a new all-time high? Because the structure looks awfully similar to like reversal structures on Bitcoin. I answer that, but also revert back to talking about the Black Swan. I do see that just because you haven't hit your 4.236 extension, right? The only problem is that we're struggled out at the retracement levels here for the Dow, right? But so like we've talked about in here, like the expectation was that there'd be this pullback down in here. And then what is going to happen in here? You're going to get a Black Swan happening in here to go ahead and all the banks who have shorted this thing, they can solidify their position and we go into absolute crumble town. So again, the thing we've been looking for here is, would a Black Swan get inserted right in here? And the question is this a Black Swan? Is this going to have contagion? Is this going to get far worse? And I think there's the potential that this is going to get really bad. There's going to be big contagion, and whether or not other banks are exposed to the same problem that Silicon Valley Bank had. Now, the thing is, FDIC has taken over Silicon Valley Bank, and the assets that they have on their balance sheet are actually good assets. They actually have a bunch of treasury bonds. So the assets that they have are good. The problem is, how much is the Federal Reserve going to step in? Are they just going to give the $250,000 for these businesses who have all their payroll tied up here in Silicon Valley Bank? And how long will it take for them to recoup a large chunk of the remaining amount that they have sitting over there in Silicon Valley Bank? And so the big problem that has happened here with this bank is that essentially there was a bank run on the bank. The bank had the assets sitting on their balance sheet. The problem is they had them tied up in long duration treasury bonds, and they were at a lower interest rate because they bought a lot of them back in 2020 and 2021. So they're like 1.25, 1.5, 1.75%, but they've got to be locked up for years in order to mature and get that interest on them. When you have a bunch of people, a bunch of companies running to the bank and trying to pull all their money out at the same time, problem is they've got to sell these things and liquidate these treasuries and forfeit the interest that they would have earned on the bonds. This caused a gap in their balance sheet from taking a loss on these bonds because people were not depositing money into the bank at the same pace as they were in 2020 and 2021 as VC funding really dried up. And well, it's a lot more alluring to go invest in these short dated bills with the Treasury and get 4.5%, 5% over here rather than depositing it into a bank and getting really next to nothing. So the amount of cash they just had sitting on hand was really thin compared to how much was tied up into treasuries on their own balance sheet. And people were not depositing cash anymore because VC funding dried up and treasury yields are so high. Why deposit it in the bank? Go throw it into treasuries, right? And the question remains, how many other banks did the same thing? The thing with Silicon Valley Bank is that the majority of the assets that they had were tied up in these treasury bonds. So this next week, we're going to see short sellers try to attack any other banks that have the same situation going on with them, where they have way too much money tied up into long dated bonds that aren't going to mature for years. And going around looking to see who has significant exposure to Silicon Valley Bank, you can see that Circle has it. That's USDC, Bill.com, Roku, BlockFi, Roblox. And as the Kobasi letter states here, these are the only companies reporting exposure so far. Yet Silicon Valley Bank has $170 billion in uninsured deposits. 50% of all VC-backed startups in the US have exposure to SVB. The fact that we have not heard from thousands of companies is concerning. This can't end well. So we don't know how many companies have significant amounts of capital tied up at SVB. And rumors are swirling that even Ripple has exposure to SVB's collapse, as David Schwartz replies saying, Ripple will issue a statement shortly. I can't say anything until they do. But you have to think to yourself, how many companies have their capital completely tied up in this situation? Circle is the number one that's been public about saying we had money tied up in there, $3.3 billion. As 2 days ago, Coinbase states we are temporarily pausing USDC-USD conversions over the weekend while banks are closed. During periods of heightened activity, conversions rely on USD transfers from the banks that clear during normal banking hours. When banks open on Monday, we plan to recommence conversions. As Circle, 2 days ago, states, Silicon Valley Bank is one of 6 banking partners Circle uses for managing the 25% portion of the USDC reserves held in cash. While we await clarity on how the FDIC receivership of SVB will impact its depositors, Circle and USDC continue to operate normally. And they had also stated, following the confirmation at the end of today that wires initiated on Thursday to remove balances were not yet processed, $3.3 billion of the $40 billion of USDC reserves remain at SVB. Hence, $3.3 billion from Circle, which means of the $40 billion that they had there, they were able to get $36.7 billion out. Pretty good, but not good enough for USDC to be able to maintain its peg. You go look throughout history, there has never been a daily candle closing way down here below 99.79 cents at one time back in 2020, shortly before C19. Otherwise, maintaining through the C19 sell-off in here, maintaining through everything, maintaining through SBF, maintaining through Luna, UST, all that stuff, boom, closes. Whoa. Way down here at 96.69 cents and currently right now sitting at 97.28 cents, completely losing its peg in here as people are quite uncertain about USDC at this point. And if you remember, we've seen depegs happen here in crypto recently, right? When we're talking about Luna and UST, we saw Tether end up losing its peg back in there, regains it in July, then loses it again during the FTX and SBF debacle, right? And then what do you know happens to Tether? Everybody is flocking to Tether now, as Tether is now worth $1.01. So now the Tether, look, it's the highest close. Let's see, have we ever had a close this high for Tether ever before? Put it right there. Have you ever closed that high before Tether? At least in Coinbase's inception, and this goes back to 2021. Looking over here on Kraken, we can see that it's the highest close dating back to the C19 sell-off, and then going back to that prior to here. So, right, so we're looking at the highest in 3 years. I mean, it almost marks 3 years to the date here to see that we're this high. And so what was it? It was a max fear event in the cryptocurrency market for Tether to be able to go this high. And just, as we've watched it, losing its peg. Now look at it. It's sitting way up here at over $1.01. So, we're going to get markets to open here this evening because I'm releasing this here on the weekend. And we'll see what the Treasury yields do. We could see Treasury yields just tumbled there on Thursday and Friday, just straight line down right in there. As what are people trying to do? Trying to find a safe place to put their money, flocking into Treasury yields, right? And we're going to get the stock market to open tonight. And what was interesting too during that moment is those last 2 days of the stock market falling, Treasury yields falling. What went up? Gold and silver went up during that time. So we're in a pretty wild moment right here in the market. And what will the contagion be? What will the messaging be as we go in to start this new week? I think there's going to be a lot of people looking for some type of reassurance there to come from the government, to come from the Federal Reserve, FDIC, that this solution is going to come very quickly for all of these companies that have all this money tied up over there at Silicon Valley Bank, and whether or not there's going to be massive contagion coming from it, or will there be a quick resolution? And that's what we're going to kind of be watching for heading into this next week, of if it's going to be absolutely chaotic or resolution and reassurance. I talk about magical unicorn fairy dust, puppet masters pulling the puppet strings, God or simulation, and I spent 2.5 weeks talking about this being the spot where a black swan can be inserted into a market, because that's when they typically do. So it's going to be watching like a hawk to see, is this about to get absolutely unreal? And there should be concern that it's possible that, yes, this was the black swan. There should be. And so when it comes to crypto, when it comes to Bitcoin, and just watching to see, hey, do we find some support here relatively soon? Is there a little bit of a dip, a little bit more? Okay, that's fine. But if we start tumbling all the way back down in here to these lows once again, which again, right, spent months talking about it, the eventual ABC typically finishes in that location. But should we continue in a straight line down in there, there's nothing structurally like reassuring about what's happening in here. We spend 2 months saying ABC. We talk about it. Showed video in this YouTube video currently. This is what we've been looking for. Showed me talking about it on the BitBoy Crypto YouTube channel weeks ago. You guys all know it. This is what we've been talking about. This would be normal. But if this is a real black swan, and if we see Bitcoin really just kind of go plowing through this level right in here and head down in here, I know there's always been for a year now, since June of last year, people calling for 10 to 12K. I'm not going to be so convinced that 10 to 12K is something that has me super interested. We've done precisely what we should do. Everything looks super good over here, but we saw a black swan show up right when it should. The chart said it was time for a black swan to show up. We don't talk about black swans on this YouTube channel. If you watch this channel for a long time, you know we're not sitting here always talking about black swans. I even make the comment in there saying how I can't stand it when people are just fear-monger constantly. That is their niche. That is what their content is about. Fear-mongering. There's a huge audience of people who love to hear fear-mongering at all times. That's not my thing. But I will show you where on charts they can typically show up at. And so we've spent the last couple of weeks talking about, hey, we're kind of in that spot where that can occur here on the Dow. Now it's time to find out, is there going to be a quick resolution to this, or is this thing going to spread very rapidly? And we in the crypto market have a lot of experience seeing things spread really rapidly, really fast. People out there in the real world, they don't know. So for these next couple of days, we'll be watching how things go. We're going to see how the market's open. We're going to see what the messaging is as we head into the new week that's being given out by the government, given out by the Federal Reserve, FDIC. And we'll pick up markets in the morning, tomorrow morning, to see how things are going. Otherwise, all this stuff, technically, it looks just like what we've talked about for months. All this stuff is gravy. Things to keep an eye on that would say, hey, it's not looking very good, is should it go straight down further? Should we just like plow through this region and not be making any type of ABC in here? I'd start getting pretty worried and saying, guys, it may be go time over here on the Dow. And one of the things to keep an eye on, the area we've been talking about on Bitcoin, that support level right down in here, we could see that's right where the altcoin market already hit. So we'll keep our eyes peeled on that too. So, I don't ever like coming on here to like spark fear and cause unnecessary worry, but we know what we've been talking about. This was the area for a black swan to emerge. Let's see what the substance is to this and how far spread this is going to get. Because should there be no resolution to this, should there not be a parachute of goodies to come in and save the day, this list is likely significantly longer. The fact that we have not heard from thousands of companies is concerning. It'll likely be a busy week. It'll likely be a lot of news throughout this week, lots of volatility, and I am sure of it. We're going to see people sniffing out other banks that were in the same position as Silicon Valley Bank. And what I'm reading over there from VCs, I've been trying to watch videos from VCs, read newsletters on it, find out what everybody is saying in regards to all of this. And they are all trying to go get accounts set up at the big banks to try to protect themselves from any of these things happening, because speculation has it the big banks are too big to fail. Wild ride. We're all going through this together. I'll say this, and I don't know the right answer. So I already know a lot of people are going to ask questions. What should I do? What should I do? I can't answer that for you. I can tell you how I manage my cash, right? I have a portfolio of cash, crypto, precious metals, stocks, real estate, and I don't know the correct answer on how to manage the cash portion of it right now. I do know the way I handle it is that I have my cash split up amongst multiple big name banks, and I have a large chunk of it in treasury bills. Is that the right answer? I don't know, but that's the way I've done it for my own peace of mind, to say, I think I'm spread. If one of them goes down, it would probably hurt really bad, but it wouldn't utterly destroy me. It would hurt really, really bad, but not utterly destroy me. And I don't keep any accounts above $250,000, which is the FDIC insurance limit. And all the banks that I bank with are FDIC insured. And so everybody's kind of got to figure that one out on their own. And this next week, we'll kind of hopefully get a clear picture of, is this the sky falling in the U.S. stock market? Or are we going to see some saving grace come in here to help these companies who weren't doing anything wrong? They were merely keeping their money in a bank, and the bank went under. And this is the 16th largest bank in the United States. This is not just some little credit union or whatnot. This is a publicly traded company. So that's what we're heading into this week. I'll be posting over there on Twitter tonight as markets open, and to see how markets react to everything. And I'm sure the news flow will be crazy, so I'll try to retweet as much as I can. So if you're not following me over here on Twitter, go ahead and give me a follow at BCBacker. I'll try to share what I can when I see it come out. It's very spotty for me to be able to get any reception over the last week. It was definitely weird to log in last night or the night before and see everything that was going on. Absolutely crazy. But I am here, and I need to update that, because your boy is now 10 years sober. So, all right, guys, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. That's kind of an idea of everything that's been going on, or at least a piece of what's been going on. It's sure to be an absolutely interesting week this next week, and we'll go through all of it together. So if you're not subscribed to the channel, hit the subscribe button. Otherwise, I'm going to wrap this thing up and go enjoy the rest of the weekend with my family as we get ready for the big week ahead. But all right, guys, that's going to be it for this one. Thank you so much for watching. If you could, please like this video and give it a thumbs up. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell so you could be notified of when I create new content and when I go live. As always, this is not investment advice, and I am not a financial advisor. But if you ever need a pick-me-up or a little bit of reassurance, just remember that the blockchain backers got your back. Have a good one.